I chose to do from this book, Crowd Control, chapters 5 and 6. So chapter 5 is titled Projects, Process, and Purpose. This chapter was broken up into 3 separate sections, and the first section was all about classroom management. It talks about how classroom management is more than just behavior and organization. Classroom management is largely curriculum and sequencing of lessons to keep students engaged. So one idea that the author had for keeping students engaged was utilizing projects. They said that they use 4 big projects throughout the school year, and these projects engage students more and get students, teachers, and parents thinking about music as more of an academic subject as well. So one idea that was prevalent throughout the entire chapter was the idea of crossing curriculum in music classes with other core classes like history, language arts, things like that. I observed at a school that did something really similar to this, and it seemed really effective, and the students had a lot of good conversations about the musical styles based on the history knowledge that they had of the era. One idea that the author had for this kind of crossing classes was team teachings, and that helps to build relationships between you and the other teachers and build a really good level of respect between 2 different subjects. So I thought that was a good idea. The author did say that these projects have to be musically enriching, so they can't just be, singing a certain song because students are learning about, slavery, so singing certain songs. It's actually making sure that you're talking about musical styles in relation to that, so talking about syncopated rhythms and certain chord structures and things like that. Something that this author also mentioned is considering different students' learning styles and ability levels when creating these projects. So giving students an opportunity to do a project tailored to their learning style. Something that was brought up was Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. This theory suggests that, people have more intelligence in another area, like a musical intelligence, a math intelligence, a spatial awareness intelligence, things like that. And giving students an opportunity to do projects that are really suited to where they are thriving the most. So musical intelligence goes along with ability level. If you have students who are very musically intelligent, have been practicing and taken private lessons for years, they might be able to perform a piece from a specific era, while other students might do a timeline or might do a short story or something similar to that. This author also talked about the importance of advocating for students with special needs in your classroom. And one point that I thought was really important was talking about advocating for access to IEPs as a music teacher. IEPs are going to be a really important tool in understanding just how your student learns and the ways for your student to be the most successful. And having access to that is just as important for music students as it is for core teachers. So it's important to really advocate for that. The next section of this chapter was about the Common Core. It talked about how music is a language, and therefore the language arts Common Core standards should be applied to music, which I agree with. And the final section was all about the education philosophy. This talked about how the practicality without purpose is pointless. So your educational philosophy should be your why you're teaching, not just what you're going to teach your students. And this should change and grow as you do. It should be adaptable and will help to advocate for your school if your program ever is potentially being cut. And the next chapter 6, is all about advocacy. This chapter talks about advocacy through the lens of showing off what your program does, and this was seen a lot in recruitment, trying to build numbers and get students involved. One idea that I really liked in this was that you're selling students as much on the class as you are on your teaching style, and how you're going to show up for them as a teacher. So it's important to make sure that in things like recruitment concerts or, 8th grade visiting nights, or 5th grade if you're middle school, you really show up for the students and make sure you show them that you're invested And another idea was to do familiar tunes at these concerts, so do things that students know and get them more involved, or actually involving students, asking questions, giving them the chance to engage with the orchestra, and letting your students, or the choir in our case, letting your students know that what they're doing is really important, and it's really important to get people involved. Another thing that I thought that was really important from this chapter was how it talked about communicating with sports teams in your school. It's really important to make sure that students don't have to choose between two interests. So communicating with sports teams, making sure that your schedules line up, and that students have some flexibility on if they do feel passionately for both. Another good idea was press releases, sending these out to parents, school officials, administrators, things like that, and performing in other venues. So getting the community involved outside of the school, and finally putting posters up in your school and even in your community. I do this a lot for my job, and we see a lot of success in getting people in the community and from schools in our concert hall when we provide posters and resources that are easily accessible. In summation, this chapter talked about the main keys to success in classroom management and in advocacy. And the first was to plan, set your plan in motion, and then be sure to stick to the plan, and then be persistent and persevere with your plan, stick it out and be adaptable, and then reevaluate the plan once it's already got going, and see how it's doing and how it's serving your students. And then work as a team, really try to communicate with your other teachers and build a level of support for the students and what they're learning. And finally, show off what your students are accomplishing in your classroom and advocate for getting more students in there and getting the support that you need.